All right, welcome to Cwic Show. My name is Greg Mattson, and I am your host. This episode is brought to you by Cardio Miracle. Go to the website, cwicmedia.com. Scroll down to the bottom, look at Cardio Miracle there. I've got a video there on the benefits that has helped me, and these are measurable benefits. I would not support this product if I didn't use it about 3 times a day. And if I didn't think that it was working for me. And it's not just a matter of thinking, it is a matter of I actually have measurable data showing significant differences by using this product. So, all right. So Tuesday night, the Respect for Marriage Act. There was like a metaphorical Tony Stark, the Jericho cluster bomb that went off in the LDS community, the Latter-day Saint community, with this support the church threw at the Respect for Marriage Act. This is very interesting. This one's going to require some very clear thinking from President Oaks on this. And it still may not be something you're happy about, but I think at least we can walk through this forest a little bit and make sure that we are understanding all of the elements that are happening here. I first want to go over some of the images that are some of the headlines that we have out there in the news. And this is part of the problem, is the clickbait from the headlines that you have here. First, from the AP, the Associated Press, it says, Mormon Church voices support for same-sex marriage law, whatever that means. But that's you read that or you hear somebody telling you that and it's like, what? Does the church support same-sex marriage? Here's another one. This is from Fox News. It says, Mormon Church comes out in support of federal law protecting same-sex marriage. And this is big news, right? Well, here's the subheading on this one. The Mormon Church came out in support of a federal law that recognizes same-sex marriages. So what is someone originally going to think about this? Well, why would the church do this? Here they've been fighting all along, historically, against same-sex marriage. We have the famous or infamous, however you want to look at it, fight in California with Prop 8. And that was just, 15 years ago or so. And so there's quite a change here that is happening. Here is another one. This is NBC News. They say Mormon Church comes out in support of same-sex marriage law. The subheading, support for the federal Respect for Marriage Act is the church's latest step to stake out a more welcoming stance toward the LGBTQ community. So again, if you read that headline, that subheadline, you're going to come away with probably a specific conclusion on what the church is doing. And I want to throw out some options here and try and navigate this a little better. Just some of the things that I have a little bit of knowledge on just from studying this with the church for a number of years and also some sources on this. So there are many layers to this story, and I want to hash these out a little bit. First, what is the Respect for Marriage Act? And essentially what you're looking at is something that started in the House of Representatives, the bill, the act. It came through as basically 2 sides, right? One side is we are going to codify same-sex marriage. Now, why do you need to codify same-sex marriage if it's already law, right? It was put into law by the Supreme Court in 2015, or at least the ability to have that. Well, what they want to do is they want to solidify same-sex marriage as a right. The reason is that because when Roe v. Wade fell just recently with this new court, the implication from Justice Thomas and perhaps others was that same-sex marriage could possibly, there might be a way to change the law on same-sex marriage. So with that in play, the Democrats went out immediately and started working on this new bill in the House. And as they worked, they tried to get bipartisan support for it, so they brought the Republicans in, and what they hashed out was basically, okay, we're going to codify same-sex marriage in the United States as always being protected. And with that, we're going to provide certain religious freedom protections against churches or for churches that do not want to follow suit with being forced to perhaps conduct same-sex marriages. And so the problem is that the language was pretty weak in the bill coming out of the House. So then it moved to the Senate. And the Senate added a couple of amendments that strengthened a little bit the language for the protection of religious freedom against having to conduct marriages on their property for same-sex couples. Now, there's a lot of gray area here. We're going to bring on an expert here in the next few days on the show, I'm pretty certain. And we'll get into the legal issues on this, because the problem is, right, the big gap with this is, are these religious freedom protections strong enough? Or by solidifying and codifying the same-sex marriage, will religions, churches be required to conduct same-sex marriages on their properties, in their temples, in their churches, in their synagogues, etc.? So that's one of the big issues here. But this overall, looking at this navigation here between LGBTQ rights or protections, non-discrimination laws, and on the other side, adding religious freedom on the other side, the church has been working on this for a very long time. I say very long. I said since Prop 8. Sometime after Prop 8, this is the route that it looks like President Oaks, I'm pretty sure, primarily has gone down. And if you go back and you listen to his talks on religious freedom, you will hear him talk about this over and over and over again. So this is not new. It is, but what you've got to consider here is, this does not mean that that the church supports same-sex marriage. What it's saying is that the church, and this is my belief now, and I, again, there's some gathered intelligence on this, and some study that I've done on this for a while. I fully believe that the church views the culture today in the United States and in the West as perhaps going beyond a point of return. And what I mean by that is that morality is probably not fully coming back. I think that the church is conceding in the culture war with these things. And what they're saying is we're not going to die on this hill. This is not the hill we're going to die on. What we are going to do is we're looking down the road further, and we see these identitarian issues becoming a major, major problem for freedom of religion. And really the core of the Constitution is what that's striking at. And so they're saying, they're looking down the road and saying, here is the bigger hill that we have got to put our banner down here in, and that's the hill we're going to die on. And we're going to concede in a pluralistic society that the laws of the land are that they permit same-sex marriage. And so the church isn't just going forward, like the headlines here say, to say, great, we're going to back up this codifying of same-sex marriage. That's not the issue. They're conceding that to get the religious freedom protections. And they've been doing this for a long time. In 2015, in the state of Utah, they passed, SB 296, which was a different type of bill than this is. But it basically stated that LGBTQ citizens in Utah were going to have certain protections from discrimination. And along with that, there was religious protection given to the churches, freedom of religion. And a lot of people questioned why they were doing it back in 2015. That's 7 years ago now, 7+ years ago. And in fact, in that ceremony with Governor Herbert signing that legislation, it was Tom Perry, I believe, Tom Perry, that handed the governor the pen to sign that. Now, that's a PR move to some degree. I don't doubt at all. And it puts the church in a very unfamiliar position, especially to its members as they're looking at these things. But they have staked out this future view of the United States and the Constitution and law. And again, my belief here, my opinion, they have said, we are not going to get same-sex marriage back. There is no reason to enter the culture war here. And yet what we need to do is look down the road further and build a bigger and bigger, stronger wall of protection, supporting and protecting religious freedom. And that's what they're doing. So the Senate has basically approved this amended bill, if you will, this amended legislation, and this is going to go to an actual vote on the floor as soon as today, being Thursday, November 18th, November 17th, and or within the next week, and it's probably going to pass. So does the church support same-sex marriage? The church supports a pluralistic society and the separation of church and state. What they don't want is for the state to impose its will by law on religious freedom, and most importantly, on the temple. They do not want the state getting involved with the temple, because this is not just about temple marriage. That's a major part of it. But think about this, right, and how this all works. The whole temple ceremony is at risk here from being changed in order to support the state and to support the law. And so there's that, I believe, is the concern. That is the holy grail for critics of the church and those that want to change the church, is to change the temple. This is where the identitarianism that we see today, the intersectionality, when you put that up against the temple ceremony and the covenants, it is oil and water. It's oil and water. So something has to give there. Now, the next question is, why is the church supporting this bill if the legal protections for religious freedom aren't very good? This is what a number of politicians are saying. This is what a number of religious organizations are saying. This is what a number of conservative organizations are saying, that the religious protections are not strong enough. And that regardless of what the Senate has done in their amendments to this legislation, that it will put not only the churches, but say the pastors or the bishops or the temple presidency or the sealers in the temple at risk for not going along with the other side of the legislation in codifying this, in codifying same-sex marriage. So why does the church say this is okay, we're going to get behind it? I don't know the answer to that. They must think it's strong enough. They must think that that's strong enough. But let's look at kind of the argument on this here, on the two sides. And to do this, we don't need to go any further than looking at the two Utah senators, Mike Lee and Mitt Romney, on two different sides of this issue. Here's the headline for, this is Fox News on Mike Lee. It says, Utah Senator Mike Lee warns religious liberty protections in same-sex marriage bill are severely anemic. So Senator Lee has a very different opinion than the church does, apparently, on the strength of the religious liberty protections. The subheadline here says Senator Lee worries Respect for Marriage Act will target people, as I was saying, with religious convictions on same-sex marriage. So what is he saying that, let's say, President Oaks and other legal background apostles such as, D. Todd Christofferson, Elder Cwic, and others don't see, or that the attorneys for the church don't see? Or is it the other way around? Senator Lee doesn't see the problems here, or Senator Lee is overstating the problem. In a tweet made by Roger Severino from Heritage Foundation, Roger Severino says the following: Senate Republicans must reject effort to undermine religious freedoms for millions of Americans. So the Heritage Foundation, or at least Roger Severino here from the Heritage Foundation, believes that the religious protections on this are not strong enough. Here's Mike Lee's response. Roger Severino is right. No American should face legal threats for holding sincere religious beliefs or convictions. Again, Mike Lee and Roger Severino here think that this bill will target not only the churches, but individuals involved with the church. He goes on, the bill before the Senate presents such a threat. So he's including this is the House bill at this point, and offers protections for religious freedom that can only be described as severely anemic. And then he goes here on the Senate bill here. He responds again and says, I offered to support the bill if the sponsors would include my amendment to prohibit the government from removing tax-exempt status based on religious beliefs about same-sex marriage for or against. The sponsors adamantly refused even to consider that. Why? I do think that's a good question. Why would that not be considered? Why can't you put that in? If you are seriously considering strengthening the position of religious freedom as you bring in the protections for LGBTQ same-sex marriage at the same time, and it's funny because it makes you remember just how marriage and church are so strongly connected and always have been, right? But if they won't add that in, the tax-exempt status is protected for religions that don't believe in same-sex marriage, like the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints does not believe in same-sex marriage. Then why would they have a problem with including that? Well, they wouldn't include it. And so Senator Mike Lee is saying, well, I would have voted for this if this would have been included. Now, here in the Deseret News, this talks of Mitt Romney and Mike Lee here. Here is the headline for Deseret News. Senate signals support for amended version of the Respect for Marriage Act. So this may not have gotten through. It's implying that it may not have gotten through the Senate without these amendments. The amendments were put in. I think there were 2 amendments that were put in that some believe are weak and some believe are strong enough, it appears. And so the subheading to this is Senator Mitt Romney was one of 12 Republicans who voted for amended measure protecting religious liberty, while fellow Senator Mike Lee voted against it. Okay, so again, the question is why? All right, so Mitt Romney believes that the protections are strong enough against or protecting religious freedom. And again, the church seems to believe that this is. They wouldn't do it if they did. This is not just to say we want to support same-sex marriage. That's not what it is. If this was just a bill without the religious protections, right, they would not be supporting it. They would not mention it. Here's what Senator Romney says on this. He said, this legislation provides important protections for religious liberty. Sounds like it's just the opposite of what Mike Lee said. Measures which are particularly important to protect the religious freedoms of our faith-based institutions. I appreciate the efforts, he says, of Senators Baldwin, Collins, and others to address this concern and heartily support their legislation. Here's another strange comment he makes here. He says, while I believe in traditional marriage, Obergefell, I always get that wrong, Obergefell, which is the 2015 decision by the Supreme Court to make same-sex marriage legal federally, is and has been the law of the land upon which LGBTQ individuals have relied. This legislation provides certainty to many LGBTQ Americans, and it signals that Congress and I, why would he say and I? That's just, I don't know. But that Congress and I esteem and love all of our fellow Americans equally. That is a bizarre statement to me. I mean, whether or not you believe in same-sex marriage does not matter whether or not you love LGBTQ individuals. That's what Mitt Romney's implying there. I like Mitt Romney, right? I don't agree with him on a number of things, but you know, I think he's a good guy, right? But why? That's just an odd statement to me. That sounds like I don't want to say political, but a statement by a politician. Now, here's Mike Lee on the other side. He goes on with his statement a little further. He says that he believes the religious liberty protections were severely anemic and largely illusory. Right? They're an illusion. They're padding in there. There's no meat to it. Where's the beef, right? He says, while I respect the efforts and emotions surrounding this issue, the bill does not simply codify Obergefell, as I know I'm saying that wrong, as its proponents claim. And despite the proposed amendment from Senators Collins and Baldwin, the religious liberty protections are woefully insufficient. Religious Americans will be subject to potential ruinous litigation, while the tax-exempt status of certain charitable organizations, educational institutions, and nonprofits will be threatened. My amendment would have shored up these vulnerabilities. It is a shame it wasn't included. Okay, so that still is interesting to me. Why would it not be included? And would another Latter-day Saint senator like Romney, did he support this? I mean, he went ahead and he's going to support and sign it the way it is without Mike Lee's amendment. But did he support it? Did he try to rally other senators and say this needs to be in there? And if not, why? Right? You have to ask yourself, if not, then why? Did he think it was just overkill? It wasn't needed? So here is the conservative religious group Family Research Council. And here's a press release they put out. And this is really, really ironic, actually. Very interesting. They say the U.S. Senate is making a mockery of marriage as it tramples on a foundational right, religious freedom of the individual. Okay, they agree with Mike Lee. Whether by the court or by the Congress, truth cannot be altered. Regardless of the action of Congress, there are millions of Americans who will remain steadfast in their love for their fellow human being by remaining committed to these truths. It's the exact opposite of what Mitt Romney said, by the way. And then listen to this. See if this sounds familiar to you. What truths? Well, that marriage is ordained by God and men and women are created in his image. Wow. That is almost word for word from the Proclamation on the Family. That is really ironic, I think. And I don't know, just something that's pretty interesting, I think. So they have a very different take on this, and they see it as losing ground in religious liberty and, of course, with same-sex marriage. Again, I really do think that the church has conceded that there is no getting back. The cultural war for same-sex marriage has been lost by the church and others, and that there's no reason to be in the cultural war in that fight, and that we will live in a pluralistic country as we do, and we will live inside of Babylon but separate ourselves. That's the idea anyway. And I will tell you, I agree with that. And I've said this several times. I've been saying it for a few years. That cultural war has already been lost. I don't think we understand the implications of the changes over the last 15 years. What has happened? I do not think that we realize the amount of damage that the attacks on the fabric of our society, on family, on the traditional family, how the consequences from this are going to start playing out with the next generation. They're already starting now. There are very few families that aren't affected by this. And there are very few religions that aren't affected by this. And this is the tip of the iceberg. I really do think that. I think that, I don't know if I've said this on the podcast, but I've said this in talks, lectures, other groups that I've spoken to. I don't think that this is like we're in a battle, a regular battle at this point. I don't try to take a position necessarily as much in the cultural war. That doesn't mean I don't believe in continuing to fight, in preaching the gospel, in getting principles that are out there. But my focus, if you noticed, is usually on the members of the church and on the church itself. I don't get that political with parties or candidates or trying to change things with policies that often. I might talk about them, but I think that cultural war has been lost. And here's what I would say about that. That is, what I've said is that to me, the rain is falling. And people are looking around and saying, all is well in Zion. It's just rain. And the rain comes in a little stronger and a little stronger and a little stronger. And it's my belief in the times that we live in that we need to be building an ark now. We need to be building an ark. And that's not to be excluded from everyone else. That's to separate ourselves from the flood and allow us to float upon the waters on top of everything. And at the same time, as Noah did, but did unsuccessfully, invite as many people as we can to get in the ark and to persuade as many people as we can through love and charity and the Spirit and truth and reason that we need to be in the ark, and we need to separate ourselves from the waters that are going to be rising soon. The rain is coming down pretty hard, and we still see it as a rainstorm. I think it's much, much more than that at this point. And that is not fear-mongering, and it's not, Chicken Little story. It's look, this is about awareness. Just be aware. The scriptures have given us all of these stories for a reason. And they're always the same. They're all about a fallen people over and over and over again. And Moroni and Mormon, they kept fighting till the end. It's not like they stopped, right? They were willing to fight even with those that were not a part of their spiritual cause. But there was not a change in the people. Their hearts were too hardened. And with Noah, it was the same thing. And so I think that I think we need to build an ark. We need to start thinking in those terms. How do we build a stronger ark? And make sure that we are ready for that. And how do we get our families in that ark? And how do we get others around us in that ark? And because that rain is coming down hard and that water will rise soon. I hope that doesn't sound doomsday-ish. I'm really not that kind of a personality. But I do believe in awareness. I do believe we need to be aware of the circumstances we are living in. We are so distracted by the internet, by social media, by streaming, by these other ideologies that keep poking in to our lives, and gadgets and consumerism and materialism. And I think we need to notice the rain. We need to see that it's coming down pretty hard. And we need to prepare ourselves as best that we can with a strong testimony that lives on unborrowed light from anyone else, as Elder Cwic said in the last conference. And we need to fill those lamps with oil, because we will be susceptible. Those of us that may feel that we are strong, if we are not ready for what is coming, and for this isn't just me talking. This is the prophet saying this, right? That we will not be able to survive. Elder Cwic's talk said the exact same thing. That was a prophecy, basically, or some writings at least from Heber C. Kimball, many, 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 many years ago, that we will not be able to stand on borrowed light, and that these times are coming. Well, we're living in these times. Let's end here with the statement from the church on the Respect for Marriage Act. They did talk about this, and this is important, again, to have clear thinking on this. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints released the following statement on Tuesday, November 15th, 2022. The doctrine of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints related to marriage between a man and a woman is well known and will remain unchanged. This is not about the doctrine of the church. You may have others online, especially a lot of those that are wanting to change this doctrine of the church, act as if we have taken a giant step toward that. I don't believe that that's true. I don't believe that doctrine will ever change. And they're reaffirming that right here. That doctrine will remain unchanged. We are grateful for the continuing efforts of those who work to ensure the Respect of Marriage Act includes appropriate religious freedoms, so they're calling it appropriate religious freedom protections while respecting the law and preserving the rights of our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. That's an interesting word there to use, rights. We believe this approach is the way forward. They've believed this for a number of years. At least, I would say 13 or 14 years. They have believed this. As we work together to preserve the principles and practices. And what I mean by that, again, the way forward for them is as you solidify non-discrimination law and as they're putting here rights, I don't think that's the right word, but with the LGBTQ community, at the same time, you are lifting up the protections of the religious community. All right, that's what they're doing. They're conceding over here, and they're making sure that we have the religious protections here. That's the path they're going down. As we work together to preserve the principles and practices of religious freedom together with the rights of LGBTQ individuals, there's the word again, much can be accomplished to heal relationships and foster greater understanding. Okay, I hope so. Greater understanding would be great. I am, by many, I think that's true. For the movers and shakers on certain agendas, I'm a little skeptical on that. But that is the official statement there. And by the way, at the bottom of this, they have here additional resources, the family, a proclamation to the world. So for those that are really concerned, again, about has the church changed their position on this? Not in the church, not doctrinally, and not in practice in the church. They don't allow same-sex marriage. Same-sex marriage would include breaking the law of chastity. They're not changing the law of chastity in the doctrine. None of that is changing. They are saying we are conceding to the law of the land, and they don't believe that they can reverse it. And so the culture war is in vain. That's what I see with them. That's what I'm pretty sure is going on. And instead, they are saying, we will concede on this, but we are going to go after this a lot. And look at all of the talks on religious freedom from the brethren in the last 10 years plus. It's just, they're from Elder Cook, they're from Elder Bednar, from Elder Christofferson, from President Oaks several times. There are many, many, many talks on this as they are trying to move their way forward. Now, is this specific? And I believe that's probably the way forward. I think that's right. I think they're saying we concede that the floodwaters are rising and we can't stop those. But we need a stronger boat. We need the ability to build the stronger boat. And of course, Noah's Ark is a metaphor for the temple. Right. And so they want to be able to build a stronger and stronger, more buoyant ark. And that's the path that they're taking. The question is why is there such a discrepancy by many who would typically be in lockstep on these types of legislation? Why is there such a discrepancy on what they believe is really protecting religious liberty and what is not? The church is on one side. Mitt Romney seems to be on that same side. Many other organizations. Senator Lee is on the other side of saying that this is sufficient to protect the individuals and the churches from litigation in the future. Thanks for listening.